you're dealing with it.
Right.
Avoiding it keeps you stuck in it.
Yeah.
And so this isn't easy. These are simple ideas. It's not easy to work through an affair. But the ideas are simple. That doesn't mean they're always easy to do, but doing them will help you recover and give you what you need to do to recover.
Absolutely. You're listening to Healing Broken Trust podcast with Brad and Morgan Robinson. This podcast is where we talk about healing from affairs, infidelity, trust, and cheating in your relationship. If you're wanting to heal your marriage, this podcast is for you. This episode, episode 9, is where we talk about ground rules for talking about the affair. And just as a reminder, go to healingbrokentrust.com/episode 9 to download your free resources. Again, that's healingbrokentrust.com/episode 9. That's the number 9. Download your free resources and walk through those resources as you listen to these episodes. You'll find it's very, very helpful. So let's get started. So, Brad, what are we talking about today?
Well, today we're going to talk about really the ground rules of how to talk about an affair. We've gotten a lot of emails at people asking basically that question. We're having trouble in this area. So we want to give you guys listening ground rules on how to talk about an affair to really make this the most productive time, because how you talk about it really sets the stage of your affair recovery process.
Yeah.
And so ground rule number 1 is just that how the affair is discussed, it's more important than really what you talk about. And this needs to be a process where the discussions are handled in a way where both spouses feel respected. And, you know, Morgan, so many people talk about an affair and it becomes so, in a way, counterproductive because there's arguing and fighting about it.
Right.
And people don't really get the healing that they need, or they don't heal the way they need to. So what we're talking about is the ground rules, and really that main idea, how we talk about this. It's so important because it's really even more important than what is said.
Yeah.
If it's done in a way with caring, compassion, honesty.
Right.
Honesty is really important. If we have that, it's really going to help us in the affair recovery process.
A lot more successful. Yeah, and how you talk about it will also shape what is said. I mean, if you are just haphazardly talking about it and you just talk forever and ever and ever, it's going to be a lot more difficult to control your emotions, and then in turn you're going to say a lot of things that are hurtful. Yeah,
and so we're gonna have some ground rules. So the number 1 is just knowing this is an important piece of the process, and what we say isn't really as important as how we talk about it.
Yeah, exactly.
And the reason I say it needs to be done in a way that's respectful, with compassion, is for the injured spouse, we need the betrayer to become the healer for us. And if they feel like this isn't helpful, they're not going to be honest and they're not going to share. And this needs to be productive.
Right.
And so...
Right, and so it's really important to set aside intentional time to talk about the affair, and that's really ground rule number 2. Setting aside that time is so important. In the beginning, you'll find that you want to talk for hours, but as the process of healing moves forward, you may find that the longer you talk about it in any given period, your conversations begin to be less and less productive.
You know, you should schedule time to talk about this, because this is one of those things in life, just like exercise or dieting, where if you're not intentional about it, you're probably not going to do it as the betrayer. Right. You're just going to want to avoid it.
Well, you've said at certain points, cut it off, because it'll be much more productive that way.
And I'm going to get into that later more specifically. But the idea with this is setting aside time gives you a break from dealing with the affair. And in the beginning of the process of affair recovery, what you're doing, most people find themselves talking about it for hours as time goes on, especially in the first weeks in the beginning. But as time goes on, people find themselves, we need a break from this. We still got lives to lead. We still have things that we got to do. We just want to enjoy each other's company and have fun. And so setting aside time where specifically discuss this.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes those intrusive thoughts that happen with the betrayed spouse, it can be very, very difficult. They can get into this cycle of asking the same question, and then feeling like they're not getting anywhere. So it's kind of difficult if you, like something you've said, something I've heard you say, is that after 30 minutes, those conversations become kind of unproductive. Is that correct?
They can. Well, as you go on longer, it can be unproductive. And so the next idea or the next ground rule is that the spouse who had the affair really needs to have what's called like a purge session or a vomit session. You really need to get it out. You need to get all the details out. You need to get everything out And the sooner this comes out, the better. It's always better if the betrayer discloses information rather than an affair partner tells the spouse.
Oh, gosh.
Or they stumble upon it. It's always better if that person says, hey, I had an affair, this is what happened, and gives you the details of it. What's not helpful, though, is when the spouse who has been betrayed has to be a detective and has to really look for answers. They feel like they're getting stuck. They have to be a detective. They have to look for answers. They have to kind of hunt. They have to snoop around. You're not doing well in the affair recovery process if that's happening.
Right.
And part of that is the injured spouse has such a need to know. And here's what you're doing by talking about this is you're giving them knowledge that is really healing for them. It really helps them. I know when I was betrayed in the past before I married my wife, completely different person, but whenever I had a chance to talk to somebody about this who knew the other person and that could shine some light on to help me understand this betrayal better, that was the only time I found relief. Many times that's what this is like for people, is when the only time they find relief is when this is actually being discussed and they feel like they're getting answers about this.
Yeah,
and so
it's a lot easier to build trust that way too.
Oh, yeah.
If you're being outright, honest and open and just very transparent.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Morgan. When you're 100% honest, you're being 100% transparent. I have nothing to hide. Here's what I've been doing. This is what I'm up to.
Information.
Yeah, and you're willing to do this. It's not like pulling teeth or you're forced to do this, but you're willing to do it. When you have that, it's a much smoother healing process. This isn't an easy process, but it's much smoother. And so the spouse that's been betrayed, they need to know that's when they find relief. But part of this, though, is people don't want to really share or they don't want to purge or vomit because they feel like they're actually doing more damage when they do that. But it's like cough medicine.
Right.
Sure, cough medicine tastes horrible, but it actually makes you feel better.
Absolutely. And you may notice that the betrayed spouse asks the same questions over and over. And, it may be a cue that you're not giving enough detail. It's very normal for the betrayed spouse to ask questions, the same questions over and over, but it may be that they're just trying to process it and they learn something new each time. They may hear something a little differently, or they may actually, something may sink in the third time that they hear it. But it may also be that cue that you need to give a little more detail. Maybe you need to give a little more information. Try not to hold back and try to just be very patient with that because it's going to be a process.
Yeah. And Morgan, before we go on to the next one, I wanted to just throw this in there. Somebody this last week said, look, I already know the worst part of this. You cheated on me.
Yeah.
Nothing else you're going to tell me is worse, as bad as that. And so it's just a lot of the people who have affairs, who cheat because they don't want to make matters worse. They don't want to see their spouse hurting. They will basically suppress information and not want to say anything. And so what happens is they're not talking, they're not sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, and we're talking about key important steps. Actually, we're on the fourth step. Betrayers, they need to volunteer information, right? And the more you volunteer on your own and the less your spouse has to dig for it, the better you are in the process of healing. So what would you say is the next one, Brad?
Well, the fifth ground rule, or one of the ground rules, is if the injured spouse attacks the betrayer, the less likely the betrayer is going to be to participate, the less willing they are to participate.
Right.
And so what happens is this gravely injures the couple's ability to recover.
Right.
And that defensive behavior that they have keeps them in a posture of self-protection instead of a healing posture. Instead of a nurturing, healing, supportive role, they're feeling attacked and they're feeling defensive. They're focused on their own needs. Having an affair is obviously a very, very, very selfish act, very selfish behavior. But what people don't understand is that these people, when they're feeling defensive, they're not in a healing posture. They're still thinking of themselves.
Right. It's like that fight or flight mode where if they're being attacked, the only thing their body knows to do or their mind knows to do is I've got to get away from this. I've got to get away from being attacked.
The spouse who had the affair, you have to be honest. You have to be transparent. You have to be willing to do whatever it takes. But the spouse who's been betrayed, this doesn't necessarily automatically give you the right to become emotionally abusive or verbally abusive either.
And it's probably very hard not to be.
Yeah, it's very hard not to be. And you feel like this is kind of your divine right. You cheated on me. I get to treat you however I want to. An attitude like that is only going to keep you stuck in the recovery process. And let me just say this. In the beginning, it's very hard not to feel a sense of entitlement. And not just in the beginning. It could be for several months. But having a sense of entitlement, like you owe me, that, especially when it comes to talking about this, those are things that you have to work through. But if you have this, you betrayed me, now you have to walk,
walk the line,
walk
right.
on eggshells. That long term does not work out into a very good marriage. That works short term when recovering from an affair because it helps, but it's not really the way to rebuild a marriage either.
And that also can be helpful if you start to find yourself going into that process, into that negative cycle, that 30 minutes, keeping it short will help you to not start becoming that critical, angry person, would you say?
It's the idea of open limitations. You can bring up a question really at any time as time goes on, and there's still the need to talk about this. With open limitations, you're able to talk about it at any time, but no longer than 15 to 30 minutes. Really any question, and we're going to talk about in a minute the types of questions you don't want to get into and ask. And it's really anything that makes you more obsessive, like sexual details or love letters or correspondence of that type. Just seeing I love yous. That makes it worse. But what I'm trying to say is, if you find yourself talking about this and it's not being productive, you feel like you're getting angry and heated, there is the need to talk about it, but how we talk about it is so important. So if you find yourself really in the first 3 minutes not getting anywhere talking about this, you're better off taking a break for at least 20 minutes. Because, again, how you talk about it is so much more important than what you talk about. And the reason I say take a break for 20 minutes is our heart rate gets around 100 beats per minute. We enter that fight or flight mode.
Oh, right.
And what happens is blood is leaving our brain, it's flowing to our feet, and we're no longer thinking objectively. We're no longer being really rational. And that's when you're more likely to have cases of domestic violence, or people punching holes in the wall, or just doing whatever, just doing really stupid stuff.
Yeah, that physiological response.
Yeah, you have a physiological response. And so if you find yourself getting there, what you can do to make this time more productive is take a 20-minute break. You can turn off the lights in the house, turn down the temperature in the house, drink something cold, and doing those things.
Breathe deeply.
Yeah, definitely breathing deeply. Taking deep breaths like that, just in and out, doing at least 6 deep breaths a minute.
And that's with your stomach.
Or 10 deep breaths a minute, breathing from your stomach area. And what all this does is it helps you cool your body down, helps you lower your heart rate, so this becomes more productive. We're dealing with trauma. And when we have trauma, heart rate rises quicker. Things are more likely just to kind of snap. Things are more likely to kind of get out of hand. And so if we follow these steps that I'm outlining, it's going to be much more productive. And as the injured spouse, it's going to help you heal much quicker, because the betrayer isn't going to think, okay, they're crazy, or why talk about this? You're letting me know when I tell you new information.
You're going to snap.
You're going to snap, and
Right.
I shouldn't tell you.
Right.
And this is what you need to know as the betrayer is, the more they know about this, the better they're going to feel, and they're actually getting better.
Right.
Kind of as we said earlier, it's like cough medicine.
Yeah.
It tastes horrible, and you have to pinch your nose and tilt your head back, and you don't want to really do it. But in the couples who do this are the couples who do the best.
Right.
And that's why we're telling you to do this.
Right. It's like the healing medicine.
It
just
is.
Talking about it.
Yeah.
It's painful.
And there's not a better way.
Right.
There's really not a better way. And so
it's worth it.
So these are the ground rules. And so that's kind of where we're at.
Okay. So now we're going to talk about...
we're talking about Ground Rule 6.
That's right. Ground Rule 6, which is basically, talk about the affair, talk about what's gone on with compassion and care. One major reason we want to keep the discussions to, a shorter length of time is because it can become very difficult to keep the conversations productive and kind. This goes back to the, how it's talked about. But we need to keep our cool the best we can, especially as the betrayer when discussing such heated information, or really both the betrayed and the betrayer. This doesn't mean we don't have bad moments, though.
Yeah, and Morgan, you're right with the trauma aspect that we've talked about the last several weeks. There is going to be people snapping. And what I mean by snapping, people getting upset easily.
Yeah.
You have the exaggerated startle response. You're going to be
those nerves are exposed.
Your nerves, your anxiety, your heart rate increasing. People are going to be upset talking about this. That's not a reason not to talk about it either.
Right.
And so, but it needs to be done in a way, the best possible way, where people feel safe, people feel secure, that kind of thing. And so part of this, us talking about it with care and compassion, is the injured spouse. What I tell people to do in my office is, as you talk about this, really journal your anger onto paper. Journal and vent your feelings on the paper. And it's just as effective as really talking to somebody about it. You talk to somebody, they're going to be able to give you ideas and feedback. You're not going to get that when you journal or write down your feelings about this, but if you turn, like I've mentioned repeatedly throughout our broadcast today, if you turn and direct your anger towards your spouse in this, they're not going to really want to be there to help you.
Right.
No matter how much shame or guilt they feel, their guilt and shame is actually going to keep them from talking to you about it more.
Right.
Because they're like, gosh, I've hurt them so bad, and I see them getting angry and upset, and so so...
And I already feel bad.
About it. I don't want to make them feel worse. I'm only going to feel worse.
Yeah, and I feel worse now because I'm making them feel bad.
Yeah, and so what you need to do is really journal about this. And what I mean by journal is just take out a pen, take out a sheet of paper or a journal book or a diary. Write in that your emotions, your feelings. Write letters to the affair partner. Write letters to your spouse.
But don't send them.
Yeah, do not send these letters. And take it outside and burn it. Get it all out. Get it all out of your system. Put it all on paper. You're only writing for yourself. It's nothing that your counselor needs to see. It's nothing that your spouse needs to see. Anybody else needs to see. You can write prayers to God. You can write whatever you want. But the thing is the process of writing has the same effect on you psychologically as verbally telling somebody that. And so when you first start this, though, there is a side effect. You're probably going to be sad for a couple hours, and you're probably going to be angry after you do it for a couple hours, maybe even a couple days. It just kind of depends. But it's just like cough medicine. It helps you deal with it. And like we talked about when we were talking about trauma, you have to deal with this. Avoiding it is only going to keep you there. And so journaling about this, writing about it, putting it on paper, what that's helping you do is you're getting it out of your mind. You're getting it on paper. You're not thinking about it as much. But it's going to help make these talks that you guys have much more productive because you're not channeling your anger and these negative emotions onto your spouse who's betrayed you. And they're going to feel like, okay, I can talk about this. We can talk about this more. I'm not saying that you should not tell your spouse, I'm really having a bad day. I really feel down. I'm not saying that you should feel like you have to walk on eggshells around your spouse, either one of you. But if we just kind of always unload on them and verbally bash them, and in some cases verbally abuse our spouse, they have no incentive because they feel like they're only doing more damage by talking about this with you. But if you journal it on paper, put it on paper, it's going to help you find peace. It's going to help you find relief. It's going to help you find really just that peace of mind. And it's going to help you have more care and compassion. It's going to make this a much smoother process. So you got to channel this stuff on the paper. And then what you can do is just take it outside and burn it. And you can watch it go. It's just going to bring more closure and more peace. And that's something that you're going to have to do, several times. It's not a one-time event, but it's going to be something you do repeatedly throughout the process for the next several months moving forward. But it's going to bring you healing. And the more you do that, the people who do that the most, Morgan, are the ones who get the best care, who get the most out of counseling.
Interesting. Yeah, that's very interesting. I can see that. In my own experience, I've found that journaling is very, very helpful. Mm-hmm. And it's funny that you say that you'll be upset or angry for a few days, and you don't even realize it sometimes that, gosh, yeah, I'm in a real poor mood, and it makes sense. I just journaled out on this book.
Yeah, but it is bringing things up to the surface. But that's not a reason, in my opinion, that's not a strong enough reason to not do it.
Right. It's a good thing because you're purging. You're getting it out.
You're getting it out. You're dealing with it. Right. Avoiding it keeps you stuck in it.
Yeah.
And so this isn't easy. These are simple ideas. It's not easy to work through an affair. But the ideas are simple. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean they're always easy to do, but doing them will help you recover and give you what you need to do to recover.
Absolutely.
And so basically, journal. The people who do that recover the best. It's going to keep you from getting riled up about this.
Absolutely. And the thing that Brad was talking about with, limiting that time that you talk with each other about certain issues, especially if you find yourself going off into, getting upset. But as you journal, you can write down the questions or comments, write them down, save them for that time, think them through a little bit, because then, when that limited time that you have, that you've placed on your conversations, you're really going to have a more productive conversation. You're really going to have more of your questions answered, probably in a more productive way, because you've thought them through. You've really written them out and kind of considered, what do I really need to know? What do I really want to know? And then you're able to ask it in a way that's easy for them to answer and for you to follow up and ask further questions to get real answers. So that's a good thing to remember there.
Thanks for listening to Healing Broken Trust. If you like this episode, you can always get our show notes and more details and links to the resources we discussed at healingbrokentrust.com. Also, as long as you're online, head on over to healingbrokentrust.com/retreat for details on an upcoming one-on-one retreat with me. If you like us, please subscribe and leave a review for us on iTunes. As always, everything discussed on this podcast is either my opinion or Morgan's opinion and is not to be taken as relationship advice because I'm not your therapist, nor have I considered your personal situation as your therapist. This podcast is for your entertainment and education only, and I really do hope you've enjoyed it. See you until next time.